Greetings! This is Elizabeth Emery for episode 8 of Off the Front about all things cycling on WIS Sports Radio. Off the Front is a co-production of me, Elizabeth Emery, and WIS Sports. In this episode, I'm thrilled to have two amazing guests, Diane Jenks, host of the radio show and podcast Outspoken Cyclist.
As far as I can tell, what's happened to women cycling is women are just more pissed off. More than anything else. You know, they're offended by everything, as opposed to just go out and do it.
And Anne-Marije Rook, editor of Ella CyclingTips, an all-inclusive website for women's cycling. First up is Diane Jenks. For close to 8 years, she has hosted a weekly radio show, which is also available as a podcast. Diane talks with notables from the wide range of cycling, including industry, advocacy, and the cycling community of manufacturers, bike builders, riders, trainers, coaches, and legislators. She also has 36 years of bicycle shop experience, so talks about fit, performance, and training as well. With me here, she talks about podcasting, her perspective on cycling after being involved for so long, and women in cycling. We jump right into her long stint as a host of her show, Outspoken Cyclist. Let's get started. Well, one of the things, since we're doing this podcast, I would love to talk to you more about your own podcast. And you've been doing it for 8 years now, is that correct?
7.5. It was 7 years, September 10th of this year.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I mean, I just think with all that experience, you would have, I don't know, lessons that you've learned over the years about cycling or about whatever.
Well, I think, you know, podcasting has really come into its own right now.
Yes.
Certainly back in 2010 when I did the very first few shows. And the first 21 weeks that I was on the air was not at John Carroll. It was up in Youngstown at, I don't know, whatever, they're WAKR or something like that. WKR, I don't know. It was an AM station, Shock Jock Radio. It was baptism by fire. I had a really good guy who knew nothing about cycling, but knew a lot about broadcasting and radio. And he was sort of my sidekick, or I was his sidekick or whatever. And so I learned a lot in those 21 weeks about what you can and cannot do with the FCC and public radio. Mm-hmm. So I would say that the most important thing about my podcasts is that I do my research, mm-hmm. and that I spend enough time. And now I've gotten, and I have to say, after 378 shows and, I don't know, 1,500 interviews, you begin to understand how to put an interview together and what kinds of questions are going to be interesting. But you just never know what somebody's going to say. I would say that my top lesson is be prepared and be disciplined. So one of the things that doing a radio show along with the podcast does is it makes you it makes your podcast or your production finite. It has a beginning, it has a middle, it has an end, it has, openings, closing, breaks, these transitions, what we call bridges from one thing to another, and that it fits within a specific time format. So they have to be between 58 and 61 minutes.
Right.
To be on the air and not screw up the guy who's behind me or in front of me on John Carroll. And for the most part, I don't run my podcasts over. I try to keep everything pretty close. I know there are a lot of people who interview people like James Altucher and Tim Ferriss, who will talk to people for hours. And it's okay, but I think that people have only so much time. A lot of people listen to my podcast and ride their trainer every Monday morning.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, I know that's what they do. They tell me that's what they do.
Right.
They're going to go out for their morning walk or whatever it is, and they'll listen to that. That's their hours. So, yeah, that discipline.
Well, that's great.
Yeah.
And so what changes have you seen over this 7.5 years period in cycling or in women's cycling?
Well, having been in retail for 43 years and watching the industry, I think the industry's in a really funny state right now. Not humorous, just strange. Everything is carbon. There's very little differentiation in product. I think retailers are struggling to figure out how to compete in an online market, and in a, I mean, it used to be we tried to compete in a discount mentality where everybody wanted it cheaper. Well, the cheaper part got handled because it went to online, and now it's like, how do you get them in your store? So they're trying to figure out how to do that. I think that, we're seeing a lot more crashes with bikes because there are more people riding. We're seeing the e-bike phenomenon, which I have been watching, strangely enough, for 30 years. So I remember at least 30 years ago when a guy who owned some stores down in Florida named Ed Benjamin said, e-bikes are going to come. I'm like, come on, Ed, really? But here we are 30 years later, and e-bikes are the up-and-coming category, and a lot of it has to do with the aging population and the people who are going to ride them. They're fun.
Yeah, and apparently it's a big issue right now in New York City. My last guest, Anne-Marije Rook, who owns a bike shop in Brooklyn, was talking about that, how that's become sort of a point of contention on the bike lanes.
Yeah, it'll change.
Yeah.
It's still a bicycle. Now, the e-bike phenomenon, I think, is a way to get people who don't normally exercise to exercise. And so, you look at what the health issues are. And then we have a lot of it's politics. You look at why would somebody not want you riding in the bike lane on your bicycle just because it has a pedal assist? I don't know. There is the purist, and then it's so many categories. But can we just realize that it's a two-wheeled, human-powered vehicle that gets you from point A to point B and you can have fun? I don't know.
What do you think about bike lanes versus just riding on the street?
I don't know that I like bike lanes because I think that the truth is people who ride bikes use them, but so do other people. Taxis don't care. Buses don't care. Police don't care. Cars don't care. It's sort of like, oh, yeah, it's a bike lane, but I'll go in it anyway. Right, it's a bike lane, but, there's no bike in it right now, so why can't I? I just don't think psychologically that they matter to the driver. They matter only to the cyclist. And so until it's the driver who needs to be aware of the bike lane. I do like the paths. I hope they start connecting. We ride the Maple Highlands Trail right now, which takes us now all the way from Paynesville to Middlefield, which is a nice distance. The towpath is going to come.
The towpath is great.
It's fabulous. So we rode in Israel, and there are no bike paths. And there was sort of this broad shoulder. And I think it's not designated. I almost think that works better. And because it's really not separate. You can take that road when you need it, and you can move out of the way when you don't. Israeli drivers are nuts. They're going a gazillion miles an hour. But remember, everything there is like straight. There aren't a lot of turns, and there aren't a lot of traffic lights, and there aren't a lot of congested places unless you're in the city, like in Tel Aviv or in Jerusalem. But out on the roads, it's, that's a different story, I think. We're talking city riding, I think, for the most part. I'm just not sure that anywhere is ready for a Copenhagen, Amsterdam kind of lifestyle. Bike lifestyle. It's kind of that dream thing that we'd all like to see it. But until such time as either cars become self-driving, which means that they're going to look out for you, and now with distracted driving, I think it's just gotten crazier and crazier.
I think that's sad, though, that we're waiting for either a machine to take over our responsibility,
right,
or cars to disappear from the road.
Well, I'm not sure how. You'd have to start with the next generation. Mm-hmm. And if you could teach children who thought, when I got my driver's license, I thought that was it. That was the best thing that ever happened to me. And that was, a gazillion years ago. Today, when my daughter became old enough to drive, she didn't want to drive. And it took a couple years to convince her that, if you don't learn to drive a car, you're going to be taking public transportation, because she didn't ride a bike everywhere. And she still doesn't ride a bike. Now, her husband has never had a driver's license. He grew up in Canada and, took public transportation or rode a bike.
Wow.
And still does here in Cleveland. He'll either take the bus and train, or he'll ride his bike downtown to his office. And so I don't know, maybe it'll just change on its own. Things evolve. I believe they'll evolve.
Right. Interesting. Since this is a women's cycling podcast, I was interested in what you've seen change for women cycling in those 7 years.
You might not like my answer. Women's cycling has been, and it's sort of like has been a topic for as long as I can remember. And what disturbs me about trying to separate women from cycling is the same thing as if we're trying to, you never talk about men's cycling.
Oh, I know.
You talk about women's cycling. And what about just people cycling? So as far as I can tell, what's happened to women's cycling is women are just more pissed off more than anything else. You know, they're offended by everything. As opposed to just go out and do it. Ride your bike if you want to ride your bike. Run in the streets if you want to run in the streets. You can do anything men can do. So my favorite.
So why aren't more women cycling?
I have no idea.
Yeah.
It's a great question. It's been asked forever. And part of it is fear.
Yes.
I believe there's fear. Men are stupid fearless. You know, so, and they'll admit it. They'll be the first to say, yeah, because I'm going to get out there. I don't care. So, you know, women are going, yeah, well, I'm not that stupid sometimes. They don't want to be on the road. So there you have a good case for separated cycling, driving stuff. On the other hand, I think bicycles, as women grew up, in my era certainly, we had bikes when we were kids. And they didn't stick with it. A lot more men, I think, stuck with it or went back to it. Women didn't. They ended up getting married, having kids, and the next thing they knew, their kids had bikes. They were 20-inch bikes, and that was their exposure back to them. They watched their husband go out for a ride or their boyfriend or whatever it is, and they're like, oh, good, this is good for him. You know, it's mentally, emotionally good for him, psychologically good for him, and he's out of my hair for now, or whatever it is. I don't see many thousands and thousands of women as avid cyclists like men are. On the other hand, you'll go to an organized ride and you'll see plenty of women riding. Plenty of women.
And there are plenty of women doing spin classes.
Which is really interesting when you think about it. There are very few men doing spin classes. So who's doing spin? Women. Why? Because they're indoors. They love the exercise. They love the feeling, that same endorphin rush that everybody gets, you know, going downhill at 45 miles an hour on your road bike. But they're not going to go out on the road and do that.
And you think it's simply the danger factor or the fear factor?
I think the danger factor is it is the biggest single factor. Yeah, that and equipment. So who's selling women bikes? You have to think about that. Women are more discriminating about what they buy. Now, men will do a lot of research to buy an expensive bike, and we sell expensive bikes. I know that. There is no reason on God's earth that you need to spend $15,000 for a bicycle just to go out and have a great time on a bike. Women, first of all, are much more reluctant to spend money, and lots of money. When they do, they get a great result. There's no question that a really well-made, well-designed bike for you is going to give you back in spades more than you ever paid for it if you like to ride. Because I think women don't want the pain. They don't want the saddle pain. They don't want the leg pain. They don't want their hands falling asleep. They don't want their shoulders to hurt. And they're much less willing to put up with that stuff than men are. Men are willing to put up with all kinds of stuff that we aren't. Oh, well, let them, you know. I mean, I'm very clear that a well-fit bike would be a good thing for a woman.
And you're saying that there aren't as many options for well-fit bikes for women?
I think there are fewer people who know how to offer that to women.
Interesting.
I mean, I don't know what your experience is with bike shops.
Oh, I have a whole list that I won't go to.
Exactly. And I rest my case, counselor. There it is, right there. I rest my case.
Yeah. Interesting. I also recently interviewed Karen Hartley from Hartley Cycles in England, and she was talking about building bikes for smaller people. And like you, she wanted to make a distinction that she's not making bikes for women. She's making bikes that will fit everyone.
Right.
Whether they're really short or whether they're really tall. And she's using 650 actually 650C wheels.
Interesting. We build 650B. We build 700. We build what you need.
Right.
Not what we want to sell you. So there is that shift that bike shops need to make about it. Just because it's on your sales floor doesn't mean it's the right bike for that person walking through the door. And so you can save a whole lot of inventory by, changing your business model, but whatever.
And you do fits at your shop, right?
Well, we don't actually have a shop. So all we have is a fit studio and then a workshop. And I've been doing professional bike fitting since 1984. Long time.
How about that?
Yeah.
So somebody comes to your shop, they get fit, and then what?
What do you mean, then what?
Where do they get the bike?
Oh, we'll build the bike.
Meaning?
It's going to be a custom bike.
But
or if you have a bike, I'll refit it.
Right.
You can bring your bike to me, and I will refit your bike to you.
So when you say you're building a bike, you're chopping the tubes and
No, we do not build frames.
Okay.
We use several custom builders around the country.
Oh, you do? Okay.
Oh, yeah. We use Waterford, which is
I love Waterford.
Yeah, and their other brand is Gunner. Mm-hmm. We use Seven.
Yes, nice. Also.
Oh yeah, and then Calfee Design is the carbon company, but we don't do much in carbon right now. Brian is very, very partial to steel, and believes that today's high performance steels will give about 99% of the population what he or she needs.
So going back a little bit to the show, I want to ask again, why did you start the show?
Somebody actually came to me for that first 21 weeks and said he got permission from his station manager to put on a 1-hour weekly radio show for 21-week trial. And he thought I would be a good moderator for that show, a good person for that show. Would I like to try it? Well, it's just like, wow, would you like to be in this beauty pageant and we make sure that you win first place? I'm like, wow, sure, I'll go do that.
And you would never in a million years?
Not in 1,000,001 years.
Oh my
never.
God, that's hilarious.
It is hilarious. And evidently he was not wrong. On the other hand, some great podcasts have grown up since then. I still believe, though, that this one, my show, may be the only podcast broadcast by a woman 48 weeks a year for the last 7 years. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And what have you gained? I mean, since you had never thought about doing it, what have you gained yourself from doing the show?
Say that a different way.
Why do you keep doing it?
Boy, that's a great question. Some days I would tell you I'm an idiot. I don't know why I keep doing it. And then something will come along. Somebody will send me an email or somebody will post something on our Facebook page that is just so inspiring or so interesting. And I'm like, well, of course I'm going to keep doing this. My husband asks me this question all the time. Why do you keep doing this show? I guess it's because I love it. And it still keeps me connected to my industry. I mean, I did not grow up thinking I was going to be in the bike industry. In fact, I don't remember ever saying to myself, I wanted to do anything specific. Like I didn't say when I was a little kid, I want to be a nurse, I want to be a doctor, I just didn't. I mean, my parents had a retail store. I went into retail. I think there's a retail gene. And so that's, was my start. But eventually it became very clear that the bicycle industry was my industry and that's where I was going to spend my career. I mean, I'm at retirement age. I'm past retirement. I retired from retail in 2012. But this is an avocation. It's a hobby. I have done some really cool things, gone to NABS several times. Bike Philly or Philly Bike Show I've been to. This year we went to the Builders Ball. So, yeah, I mean, there are some perks. There's some perks. I get to occasionally test a product. A couple of weeks ago, I talked about the Gore-Tex Shake Dry jacket that they sent me, and they said, would you test it when you go to Israel? I'm like, sure. I mean, I only wore it once, but it did its job. It was cold that morning, so yeah.
And you mentioned being a woman host. Is that important to you? And do you feel like you're a role model or a mentor to other women hosts? I just think that it distinguishes my show maybe from all the other cycling podcasts that are out there. Mm-hmm. I like that you include so many different aspects about cycling in the show. Like you're not specializing about tech or about bikes or about athletes. I really like that.
Well, I think when I decided to do the show, what mattered to me most was to be inclusive of how broad the bicycle business is. And a lot of people don't understand that the bicycle industry is not just bicycles. It is advocacy, and it's training, and it's triathlon, and it's racing, and it's brevets, and it's, touring, it's commuting, and it's transportation. It's all these things. And it is, I think, both an asset and it's a very big liability to the bicycle industry as a whole in a way that you can't really promote the industry. As, you can't just say it's beef or grapes or milk or whatever it is, or even automobiles, because everybody knows the basic idea of an automobile is to get in the car and go somewhere. Well, the basic idea of a bike could be, I'm going to go ride a mountain bike trail. I'm going to go cross country. I'm going to go race in Europe. It could be anything.
I'm going to go get my groceries down the block.
Right.
Well, I am thrilled to have talked to you and
Thanks.
to have met you. And thank you for being on the podcast.
It is my pleasure, and thank you for having me.
Sure thing.
All right. We'll talk again.
My second guest is Anne-Marije Rook. Originally from the Netherlands, Anne-Marije is a multilingual journalist currently living in Seattle, Washington. Anne-Marije has worked in media for well over a decade. By media, I mean everything: print, newspaper, radio, online, and photojournalism. Currently, she works as the editor of Ella CyclingTips, where she covers racing, equity in the sport, and tech. She is enthusiastically passionate about cycling, all kinds of cycling, which you will definitely hear in our conversation. She's also an active transportation advocate, an elite bike racer, as well as cycling coach and mentor. To encourage more people to get out on a bike, she does her best to ride with everyone who asks. I can't wait until I'm in Seattle to take her up on that, and I'll offer the same to anybody who comes to Cleveland. I'd love to ride with you. The road season just started, so visit the women's cycling page on cyclingtips.com to find out everything that's going on in women's cycling. You'll even find links to live coverage of racing. I offer a huge grateful welcome to Anne-Marije for being a guest. I'm so happy she's here to talk to us. She begins with what kind of riding she's doing herself these days.
I am a lot slower and more exploratory than I used to be. I don't train anymore. People are always like, "You're always on your bike. You're always riding." I was like, "Exactly. I ride my bike. I just don't train. I don't do intervals. I just do it purely for enjoyment and fulfillment. That means, more gravel, more mountain biking, just doing whatever I feel like each and every day."
Do you miss training?
No. No, I feel like I should be saying yes, but I don't. I just like to hop on my bike and see where it takes me that day.
Right.
So I used to race pretty avidly, mostly on the road. And so there's a very specific kind of training that goes into being competitive. And I don't miss not having to do 2x20s and those kind of intervals. I do spend some time on the trainer still, but that's purely because I want to. Trainer riding is still better than no riding at all.
Did you have trouble transitioning from racing to being more casual?
Yeah, I think part of it came in my current job as the editor at CyclingTips, where I do a lot of traveling. And so it almost happened organically because when you travel a lot, it makes it really hard to train. And then, yeah, I just slowly but surely transitioned out of taking myself too seriously.
Mm-hmm. Do you ride mostly with women or a real variety of people?
I think I ride more with men, actually, than I do with women. I tend to have more male friends, and there are more men that cycle, so it just happened. I mean, I certainly work in getting more women on bikes. That's a big mission of mine, and I would like to see more women on bikes, but I think more than anything, it's the fact that it is a very time-consuming hobby, an expensive hobby at that, and there's a lot of factors involved in women's lives, especially specifically those with children, that just doesn't allow for such a time-consuming hobby.
Right. I mean, running certainly is much more efficient in terms of exercise.
Exactly. With that said, there's a huge trend in triathlon with women. That is also very expensive and very time-consuming. So I'm thinking also that it's part of having community, which is already very active in triathlon and still growing, I feel like, in cycling.
And you also coach.
I do, yeah. I have about 6 clients right now. And that the way that came about was I started teaching cyclocross clinics, and then started, actually a coach of mine at the time was like, hey, you should coach other women. And I was like, sure, yeah, I'll give it a try. I initially ended up with all male clientele. Again, I think it's because there's just more men cycling than women. And now I have a nice split of male and female clients.
And what do you like about coaching?
Cycling is my biggest passion, and so being able to share that passion with others and what I've learned over the years is really fulfilling for me. And I get a real kick out of watching them do well and helping them meet their goals. And then just that I do know how to train, and being able to guide them and give them just a schedule, which for them is easy to adhere to, is very rewarding. But my approach is that I am a firm believer that happy athletes are successful athletes. And so for me, the enjoyment and the fulfillment of the sport comes first, result second. Now I realize that result often leads to fulfillment and enjoyment. I'm no exception in that either. With that said, if you do it right, cycling can be a lifelong passion. And the burnout rate can be a lot lower if you do it right. You take it one step at a time, and so the sportsmanship and self-empowerment and all these other aspects that are great about cycling transcend into your real life, which could make it a lifelong passion for anyone who gives cycling a try.
Mm-hmm. You talk about doing it right. Like what's an example of doing it right versus doing it wrong?
Well, I'll start with doing it wrong. That's just going all in too fast, where cycling, since it is so time-consuming, ends up being your whole life. You get up, you train, you have breakfast, you go to work, you come home, you train some more. That's it. And I think you need to find a balance between actual life and your cycling life. Because I think a lot of people, it is easy to see progress quickly. And the temptation of taking it too far, becoming too competitive, or even looking at maybe the pro career is very tempting. And so you give up everything that's currently in your life for something that's only temporary if you do decide to race. I mean, you can do racing your whole life, don't get me wrong, but at the same time that high end of the sport, it's a temporary, 5-10 years in your life, and it's not worth giving everything else up for.
Do you talk to your athletes about sort of transitioning out of the racing and then into sort of the next phase of life?
I do. Most of my athletes are still racing, so they're not into that part of their life yet. But I do have young ones, juniors, who, are looking at college applications and their life going forward. And so the discussion of where does cycling fit in is very important at that stage as well.
That's interesting, yeah. So where do you think that philosophy came from?
I think it's because I've been a lifelong athlete myself. I played baseball and softball and tennis and growing up, and so at some point I was that high school student who was going to college and looking at sports scholarships, like, do I go to this college even though it doesn't have my desired degree, but I can get a scholarship in sports, or do I just pursue academics? Like, what do I do? And then while I'm in school, where does sport fit in? And then started into the workforce. How do I balance work life versus my athletic life? And I think over time I just learned what's important, because I did do it wrong for a little bit. I did take it myself a little too serious, and that had its impact on relationships. And I think by my mistakes I can hopefully teach others.
Mm-hmm. I ask a lot of athletes if they like competition. So I'm going to ask you that, and I'm also going to ask you in relation to what we were just talking about, sort of where does the competition phase of being an athlete fit in with sort of the bigger picture? And do you even think that competition is important at all?
It's funny because that's my favorite question to ask athletes myself. When I'm interviewing them for Cycling Tips, I always ask, do you love the bike or do you love competition? And you'd be surprised who answers which way. And for me, it's the bike. Like, I love cycling. Like, it doesn't have to be competitive anymore, and that's okay. And it never was competition never was the end all. And I always loved just getting on my bike, commuting, exploring, and so that love is what made the transition out of the competitive area a lot more easy for me. With that said, competition is important. It's what makes us athletes. It's what makes us type A people. It's you don't have to quell it in any means. You need to know how to manage it. And I am a very competitive person in every which way, like whether I'm bowling or, playing cards or doing board games. I'm always competitive. I always want to win. And it just comes down to being able to manage it and use it for something good.
Yeah. I've been really fascinated by the wide range of answers that I've gotten to that question.
Did they surprise you?
They do. I mean, I think I probably fit in your category. I am competitive, but that was probably my weak link when I was a racer, as didn't have that like sort of kill everybody else kind of competitive edge. And so I think it's really interesting to hear from other athletes, where they fit in that scale.
Absolutely, yeah. Because even though I was very competitive, I was never I never had that singular focus. I always had too many things going on in my life, like whether it was a career or, multiple degrees when I was in school. Like I always wanted it all. And eventually I learned that you can't, because there's only so many hours in a day. And what do you curb? And for me, the choice was always to go for my career versus go, in the athletic route.
Mm-hmm. Tell me a little bit about your career and what you're doing now with Cycling Tips.
Sure, yeah. So I've been a journalist for 12 years. Started off in, straight up newspapers, so the newsroom, in radio, as a stringer, just doing what's now, I guess, considered old school print journalism. And over time, when I started bike racing myself, I realized that there was very little media on women athletes and women cyclists specifically. And so I just started kind of tweeting. I started writing for Podium Cafe as a freelancer, just because I happen to be multilingual. And so I was able to translate things from Europe and just putting more information about women athletes out there. And then people took note. Cycling Tips was starting a women's publication called Ella. And so they reached out and we started talking. And 3 years later, here I am, still plugging away at making sure women's voices are heard and seen.
Yeah, the website is really great, and I love getting the daily Cycling Tips email.
Thank you, yeah.
And I recently found the Secret Pro, which I just love.
Yeah, so the Secret Pro is the women's take, obviously, on the Secret Pro. And it's a person in the pro peloton whose identity we keep protected, and thereby she can write freely about whatever is going on.
Yeah, and it's really awesome. This latest episode is quite good. So let's lead right into what's happening with women's cycling. The season is about to start or has already started. So tell me what you're thinking.
Yeah. The season kicked off in Australia, and they had a full month of racing, and then everyone went back for their training camps, and it's about to start in Europe. And every year I get very excited about this time because, it's a new season, who's strong, who's going to be the breakout rider. In the last couple of years, every season has been so good. The performances have been wide range, and it's just growing as a sport. It's getting more professional, and there's more big names to watch versus, some years where there was just one or two star athletes and they just rode away from the pack. Nowadays, it's a lot more exciting. And so, early season also brings on the really hard races, the classics, the cobbles, the wind, the rain. So for me, that's a very exciting time. And I think we have a few new races on the calendar this year, which is great. Some big men's races now have a women's version of the race accompanying it. So we're moving in the right direction. It's still a very, very difficult career for these athletes. But I think in terms of fans, we're going to see more. There will be more coverage, so we'll be able to watch more racing, and there will be more riders to watch.
Before I forget, what can fans of women's cycling do to support this new impetus to get more equality in cycling?
Watch and read the coverage that is out there. So share links, click links. Sharing and retweeting alone doesn't do anything. The links need to be clicked. And when you click a link, in analytics, it shows readership, and readerships in terms bring on advertising, which brings more money in the sport, yada, yada, yada. So yeah, read what is out there. And whenever there is a live coverage of any sort of event, watch it. Numbers matter. Numbers matter big time when it comes to women's sports. They need to know that there's a demand, and they need to know that people want to get more of this coverage.
And are there places that you go to find the live coverage?
We play on everything that we can find on CyclingTips. So we'll host streams if they're available. UCI on their YouTube makes a lot of them available. Unfortunately, they are geo-restricted a lot of the times. And the other sources are the race websites themselves. I always say women's cycling lives on Twitter, and it did 5-8 years ago, and I think it still continues to live there. Between Instagram and Twitter, that's where you find women's cycling.
Right. Okay, so let's get back to, for example, on the Secret Pro, one of the things that she did talk about was the state of equality in women's cycling and going forward this year. And one of the things that really struck me, and I think about a lot, is "you should be grateful" was what she quoted. What do you think about that? And she was referring to women cyclists should be grateful to have a position on a team, despite any inequality.
Yeah, I mean, that is the harsh reality is that there's no money to be made in women's cycling, period. In the US, the average for domestic pro is $3,000 a year. What can you do with $3,000? Nothing. 50% of the pro peloton on the women's tour doesn't get paid, or very little. It's abysmal, and that's the harsh reality. And I think the problem that especially the Secret Pro is referring to is that a lot of athletes themselves perpetuate that lie of equality. Like, oh, look, there's a team. I'm on a team. But you don't get paid. You don't get the same services as the men do. And you don't have the same racing opportunities that men do either. And so you should be grateful is a thing that I think most athletes themselves tell themselves, like, oh, at least I have a team to race for. At least, I do get to do my hobby, which a lot of athletes consider themselves hobbyists, right? Like, I get to do my hobby, my passion for a living, so I should be grateful. It's a tough one because sports is a business. It's an entertainment, right? We go to watch sports, and that's ultimately how money is made, through advertising, through ticket sales, through sponsorships and apparel sales and all that stuff. And that's not happening in cycling because it's one of those things where it's a catch-22. If you need to invest in coverage in order to bring money back in, because without seeing it, you don't have that entertainment factor. You don't have any of the revenue opportunities. It's an issue that I cover year in, year out. Every year, it's like just spotlighting how little these athletes get paid. It's a bit of a shock factor for most people. And then the question is, how do we change that? And what's exciting this year is that there's a new riders union called the Cyclist Alliance. And so these women are getting organized. They're getting experts from within and outside the industry to look at rider contracts, to look at insurance, to look at opportunities to make the sport more professional and bring in more revenue streams.
Have you seen any changes already from that group?
I haven't yet. And I think they're still in the infancy stages where they're trying to get a seat at the table. Luckily, some of the athletes like Ida Slappendel and Carmen Small are very well placed, and they do have a seat at the table. So I think it starts with discussions. It starts with raising awareness and hopefully trying to get the right people involved to discuss more racing opportunities, more coverage, and better contracts. A lot of the stuff, like in terms of contracts and insurance, will obviously happen behind the scenes. Not exactly something a lot of fans will be following, but will have a massive impact for the riders themselves.
Sure. Is the Cycling Alliance getting buy-in from the riders? Because one of the problems that I see with that "you should be grateful" quote is that it pits one rider against another. And so I'm hoping with the Cycling Alliance that doesn't happen.
Yeah, and you hit the nail on the head there. That's been a huge issue with women's cycling, because in one team you'll have a rider who makes, a relative fortune compared to someone who's not making any money. And So a lot of these numbers are not out there. They're not public. When you've got one rider making 100K and the next rider doesn't even make enough to feed herself, like it creates a lot of animosity within the team. And so people don't talk about it, which has been a real big issue because then, without knowledge, you can't do anything. And the Cyclist Alliance is good in that right now they're in the rider gathering phase. But in the surveys they've done, they've got every team represented. And so the word is out there, riders are joining. And, with strength in numbers, they'll be able to accomplish something.
Mm-hmm. Are you positive? I mean, you've been following this for a long time. So are you feeling positive, or are you just sort of feeling like, oh, my God, it's just another attempt?
Depends on what day you ask me. It comes and goes, you get out there. And one of the reasons I do what I do is because I'm so passionate about equality and women's issues, perhaps even more so than the sport itself. And, there's days where you're out there swinging and other days where you're just like, what am I swinging at? Like, it makes no sense, or there's just no momentum. And when it comes to the Cyclist Alliance, I am feeling very positive because they've got a lot of people involved from outside the industry, a lot of professionals. So it's not just the rider themselves, it's people who are experts in insurance and contracts. And, they brought lawyers involved. They got sociologists involved. This is a bigger issue than cycling. This is an issue of workers' rights. And so they're really approaching it from that point of view, which I feel is necessary in order to make any sort of change.
Yeah, I also like what they're doing is it's not just about salary pay equality, because that has ripple effects to the entire sport and how professional a team is run or not run.
Absolutely. You can't just demand salary without offering a revenue stream. Where's this money coming from? And that is the bigger question is we need to have better media coverage, show the sport in order to create revenue streams. And that needs that onus shouldn't be on the riders per se. That should definitely be on the race organizers. And I'm glad that there's at least a discussion that how do we make this better for everyone involved.
Yeah. So other than this Cycling Alliance, what else are you looking forward to this season?
Well, the racing itself, of course.
Of course.
There's some breakout performances last year that, like certain riders like Kasia Niewiadoma, who I'm really excited to see. She switched teams, so what is that team dynamic going to be? Every year I just, it's like a clean slate, what's going to happen. And we've got, a new world champion, Chantal Blaak, is in the Rainbow Stripes this year. What does that mean for her on that superstar power team? Is Marianne Vos going to do anything? It just, there's all these little storylines that I like to follow throughout the season. I mean, that's what makes it exciting. And I think what I'll be watching is how many of these races can we watch? Where will the coverage be coming from? And we will definitely be promoting the crap out of any race that provides live coverage. So people should check in on our social media and on our websites to see where they can watch the races live.
That's awesome. And are you traveling to the races?
Sometimes. I don't know yet what my season is looking like this year. But like last year I was at the Giro and the World Championships and a couple of the early classics. And even 3 years in, that's still, as a cycling fan, very exciting for me.
Mm-hmm. And what other stories are you going to be watching during the season?
Well, aside from the professional development of the sport, there's always the tech component, like disc brakes this year. What's going to happen? Who's going to be on disc brakes? That started last year, and then that'll carry on this year, and I'm curious to see what's going to happen there.
What do you think about disc brakes, especially after Katie Compton had that huge gash in her knee?
Oh man, that's like a whole episode on its own.
Of course.
I actually, as a rider, I think out of my current 6 bikes hanging on the wall here, only one of them doesn't have disc. So I like the stopping power of disc. And actually, the Valley of the Sun, which is a U.S. season opener race, was last weekend, and there was a big crash in the criterium as well because of a person riding disc and hadn't been riding that bike long enough, so wasn't familiar enough with the stopping power and caused a big crash. And so I do think that it's a all or nothing kind of situation where everyone should be on one or no one, at the very least within a team. And if that isn't even possible, I'd say those people riding disc should ride it for a while before they race on it. But I don't think it's the disc that's causing issues. I mean, there's much sharper objects on a bike than the disc itself. I mean, if you think about it, the chainring, if you were to try and pass that through, safety checks these days, it probably wouldn't, go through if the argument is sharp objects. So I don't think the disc is the evildoer, the sharpness of the disc. I think more than anything, it's the people riding them.
Right. You mentioned earlier that it's really important for you to promote more women cycling and getting more women on bikes. How are you doing that?
So part of it is through coaching, through clinics, through my daily job in writing about female athletes. And the other way is I like to take people on rides. And it doesn't matter who they are. I'll join people on a commute. I'll find a route for them. Previously, I worked at a transportation advocacy organization, and as a nonprofit, the whole goal was what we called MBOB, more butts on bikes. And so that was our day-to-day, right? Getting more people on bikes and just showing that the bike can be a recreation, it can be transportation, it can be anything you want it to be. And living in a city, I live in Seattle, which is getting increasingly more crowded. Bikes are such a nice gateway to just getting around and relieving some of that stress and running away from, the density a little bit. And my goal is just to get as many people out there on bikes. And so a lot of interactions I get with strangers that I don't already know because the cycling world isn't that big, so you kind of get to know everyone. But people will reach out of the blue saying, "Hey, I heard you on CyclingTips," or "I saw your Twitter. Would you go on a ride?" And it's my mission to try to always say yes.
Oh, that's awesome. What have you found to be the biggest barriers to get people? Like, what's stopping people from riding?
Safety, hands down. I think, and that's the reason why gravel and off-road and adventure riding is getting so popular, is because people just need to get away from cars.
Right. Do you think the fear is justified?
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, living in a big city, I've been hit too many times, and it's getting better. I mean, transportation advocacy groups are getting better at advocating for bike infrastructure, but in most states, and Washington State is no exception, the budget for transportation projects like bike ped projects is 1%. And when your mode share is 3 to 4%, it should at least represent your mode share, in my opinion. And I think Washington and Oregon are some of the better states when it comes to that, and it's still abysmal. So, yeah, safety is a big issue, and it's warranted. Luckily, it's probably not as scary as people think it is, especially if you want to go dive down statistics and find out how dangerous driving is. So,
right. And sometimes I feel like it just requires practice, but like, how do you practice if you're afraid?
Yeah, so when you are afraid, is reach out, find someone who does it, and just ask them to show you the ways.
Right.
There are better routes that only locals know.
Right. Do you like bike lanes, or do you like separated bike trails? Like, for commuting, what do you prefer?
So I'm a pretty fearless commuter. I'll go wherever. With that said, I think separated bike lanes are the best. They need to be segregated from cars. That's not always feasible, especially in older cities where there's just no space. So any sort of dedicated bike lanes, and even if it's just paint, I know paint won't protect you, but at least it makes a space for you that you deserve to be there. You're allowed to be there. You should be there. Car should watch for you there. I hate this car versus bike attitude that we are seeing so much, because, a lot of drivers spend time on their bikes and vice versa. And so it's not them versus us. It's just us all trying to get somewhere. And so whatever type of, facilities the city can afford is better than no facilities, in my opinion.
Have you learned in your many years of commuting some tips to keep yourself safe?
Visibility. Make yourself as visible as possible. I mean, you might feel silly, driving around or riding around like a Christmas tree, but make yourself as visible. And I know the onus shouldn't be on you, and everyone should be looking for the other person, but the reality is people are distracted. there's more distracted driving and even cyclists texting or running late. So we're all at fault. And the best way to minimize that is to make yourself as visible as possible. Lights, reflective clothing, all of the above. So when they do see you, they need to know what way you're turning. And so, yeah, I always say make yourself as big as possible.
Do you ride sort of in the middle of the street to make yourself visible?
If there's no separated bike lanes and I feel unsafe, then yes. Yeah. Otherwise, I will definitely hug the right hand lane.
Cool. Well, I am so excited to follow you, and also so excited to follow Cycling Tips and watch some racing this season.
Excellent. And yeah, thank you for doing what you do. I think it's very important to hear more voices.
Oh, well, thank you very much.
Great. Thank you.
Yep. Bye-bye. Thank you for listening and supporting women's sports. And thank you to both my guests for being part of the show. For show notes, including related links of this episode, visit wissports.com. Please post a review on iTunes. It certainly helps more listeners find our content about female athletes. On wissports.com, also find hundreds of episodes about a huge range of sports, along with blogs, articles, and videos. We are also on all the social media channels at wissports, so follow us there and let us know what you think. You can always email us at info@wissports.com. For more of me, Elizabeth Emery, listen to my other podcast, Hear Her Sports, available on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, and anywhere you listen to podcasts, and also at hearhersports.com. Also find me on social media at Hear Her Sports. Bye-bye.